Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Garrett Horner. This is the magical Stage 17 of the Grand Tour Giro d'Italia. Now, I highlight Stage 17 because Stage 17 always puts on a show when we're talking about the Grand Tours. I got up my jersey up here from Lotto from Stage 17, and it was an epic day that year. And today is going to be a great battle because it's raining, it's cold out there. The temperatures are about 11 and 15 Celsius out there, and it's raining and miserable. And before the race even starts, we're going to see Mark Cavendish sitting down, and the sprinter looks miserable. And he should be. I don't know how these guys make it through this stage, because when you're a sprinter, and they have 3 categorized climbs on today's stage, and really there's 5 because there's 2 gyms hidden in there right at the start, 8K straight up the hill from kilometer 0, and then they have another gym hidden after the first KOM just past the halfway mark on today's stage. That's about 5 kilometers and still pretty stiff at around 6%. So they call it 3, I call it 5. When you're sitting on the bench though and you're Mark Cavendish, you got to look depressed because it's raining and you know you're going to get dropped. So these stages really is when you have to pay a rider like Mark Cavendish, because they don't want to do these stages, right? They're just going to suffer all day. They're going to freeze. They're going to be frozen on the descents. They're going to warm up on the climbs, and then they're going to freeze on the descents again on the other side. So it's going to be a miserable day. Now, when the racing starts, the flag drops. Like I said, it's cold out there, but it's going to start with a climb. So when they're in the neutral section, riders are already adjusting their clothing. On a stage like today, it's always difficult to get your clothing right. So you're going to see riders through the neutral section start changing their clothing. Even at the front, when we're talking about almost at kilometer 0, you see one rider there, DSM rider, I believe it's Nico Dins on the left side, on the right for the riders. He's there, and all he's wearing is shorts and jersey, right? You look at everyone else, especially the small little climbers like myself, they got leg warmers, arm warmers, gloves, probably got a vest, an undershirt, so it'd be undershirt, jersey, vest, and then probably their rain jacket, and then Nico Dins, the DSM riders, shorts and jersey. It's absolutely comical, but that's the difference between those sprinters suffering so much going up these climbs and the little climbers going up these climbs that aren't maxed out. So if you're not maxed out, you're not 100%, means you're not pushing the blood through the body, means you're not overheating. So that's why you see the different dress code here early on this stage 17, because the big guys, they know they got to make it over this first climb. The little guys, some of them want to be in the break, but some of them got to ride for their general classification leader here on today's stage, because we got 4 guys that are going to battle out today's stage. Now, Carapaz is first. Jai Hindley's only 3 seconds behind. Almeida, the Portuguese rider, he is the one question mark on today's stage, because we've seen him getting dropped on the beginning of most of these climbs, early into the final climbs anyways, and having problems and riding by himself. Now, Mikel Landa, we've seen him do some spectacular stuff just last stage on stage 16. So can he shine again here for Bahrain Victorious? When the racing starts, it's Hugh Carthy that's lighting up the road. Now, it's 8 kilometers up this first climb, and Hugh Carthy is motivated. He's got a little company with Felix Gall from AG2R, Arensman again from DSM, and Alessandro Covi from UAE Team Emirates. Now, if you're UAE Team Emirates and you got to send someone up the road because you want to try to win a stage, it's not a bad idea if you're going to send Covi. I still don't agree with it, but okay, because probably Covi ain't going to win a stage like today anyways, so there's not much reason to send him up there, but he's probably not going to help much for Almeida later in the stage either. But don't send Formula. You know my rule on that, and you know how much I've complained about it. So that group of 4 is up the road. They're flying, and it's Hugh Carthy doing most of the damage there. Now behind, it's about a 19-rider group back there being led by Matthew Van Der Poel and 3 Jumbo-Visma riders in there. Sam Omen's in there, Koen Bouwman's in there, and the Dutch rider Hess Limrace. Now, Limrace, we've seen him earlier in the week here when he was riding fantastic. I believe he was 3rd on one of the stages. So Limrace, we know he's got some form. Now, with that group of 19, they're going to catch the front group of 4. That means that Carthy, EF Education rider, he's been riding about 18 kilometers already early in this 168 kilometer stage. Now, like I said, there's 5 climbs on today's stage. They just went over the first one, and Hugh Carthy was already putting out some bullets here early on this stage 17. Now, behind, when we hit the next KOM, it's going to be Koen Bouwman that throws in a massive acceleration right before the KOM summits, and it's Ciccone, Trek Segafredo rider, that's on his wheel. Ciccone can't hold the acceleration from Koen Bouwman as he drops the Trek Segafredo rider, takes maximum points on this first categorized climb here on stage 17. They go over the top of the first categorized climb, and it's Jumbo-Visma throwing in attack, and they got 3 guys on the front going up the road on this group of 23 back there. Now, coming down the descents, it's Santiago Buitrago, the Bahrain victorious rider, who crashes going into the right little chicane. Looks like, I'm taking a bit of a guess here, educated guess, that he might have caught a lip where the pavement changes color there, and he slides out and goes into the wall. He gets up yelling and screaming. He's not happy, but he'll get back on his bike and get into the second group, because now that front group of 23 has split up, and Mathieu van der Poel's in the front group, Ciccone's in the front group, and 3 Jumbo-Visma guys are all represented up there. They're working, but not necessarily fabulous, and the riders behind will eventually bring them back after about 8 kilometers, and now it's all Grupo Compacto again in the peloton, if you want to call it that, because there are 23 riders up the front. If you go back to the GC field, that's actually the peloton. It's Ineos back there that's riding a steady tempo, no stress at all so far throughout today's stage. Once they got the selection made on that first 8-kilometer uncategorized climb here on stage 17. Now we hit the next uncategorized climb, number 2, that wasn't listed. It's 5 kilometers, like I said, about 6%, and it's Mathieu van der Poel that throws in the next attack. He's got Guillaume Martin, Felix Gall from AG2R, and Alessandro Covier again in the move. Now remember, those last 2 riders, they were in the move originally going up that 8-kilometer climb. So these guys are putting out some bullets too, because they rode with a spectacular Hugh Carthy up the first climb, and now they're riding with Mathieu van der Poel up the uncategorized climbs. Now, they'll stay off all the way till we start the monster climb. The most difficult climbs to start is going to be the final one, but this one's pretty solid, because at 45 kilometers to go, this climb, about 12 kilometers long and just under 8%, is going to be the penultimate climb, because the last climb is going to be a monster. Probably the biggest, hardest climb that they've had at this year's Giro d'Italia. When we start the penultimate climb with Mathieu van der Poel up the road in a group of 4, behind, we start seeing a selection out of the front group here. It's Hugh Carthy, though, really driving it hard on this penultimate climb. Now remember, I told you, Hugh Carthy did a lot at the beginning. He's done a lot through the middle, and now we're on the penultimate climb of 12 kilometers and at almost 8%, and it's Hugh Carthy driving. He's got some company along. Santiago Buitrago, Jan Hurt, who won yesterday's stage, Mauri van Savenot, Koen Bouwman's there, and that group is 5 guys, but then later it's going to be Hess Limrazer that joins them, make that group about 6. Now, Mathieu van der Poel started this climb with about a 1.5-minute gap with his group, and now it's Hugh Carthy back there that's driving on the pedals, bringing it all back. Now, we lost Ciccone earlier going up the climb, and with the KOM coming up next, it's going to be Koen Bouwman that slides away from the group to grab maximum points on his KOM lead here, because like I said, Ciccone already fell off the pace. That means Jumbo-Visma's Koen Bouwman has a solid lead here on the KOM. Going down the descent, we start getting in the fog, and just as you see in the picture, just barely, it's Mathieu van der Poel, and he's sliding away from the group behind. Mathieu van der Poel's got some company, because Limrazer has done a solid job and is flying down this descent. The group behind, remember, these guys behind, it's Guillaume Martin. He can't go downhill to save his life, and Hugh Carthy can't go down to save his life either, and both those riders are on the front of this group behind. So the 2 Dutch riders up front, they're speaking the same language for certain, and they've got full gas on the pedals. But Limrazer, Jumbo-Visma, is going so fast that the cyclocross champion back there, Mathieu van der Poel, can't hold the wheel, and he's got a gap. At one moment in time, Mathieu van der Poel's flying into the left turn, almost loses it and crashes into the barrier. Hess Limrazer comes out of that same turn really tight next to the barrier, but now he's got a gap on Mathieu van der Poel, and he's sprinting and going as hard as he can. Mathieu van der Poel, the legend back there, he is doing everything he can to hold the gap to the Jumbo-Visma rider up front. Now, they'll come back together. When they were coming down this descent, I was like, Hess, Limrazer, you don't have to go faster than Mathieu van der Poel. At this point in time, if you stay together, you guys will keep some energy. And if you're just going to sit up and wait for Mathieu van der Poel anyways, There's no reason to go that fast. Just back off a nudge. Keep the two guys together and continuously work pulling together. Now, they went so fast down this descent with Hugh Carthy back there and Guillaume Martin leading that group behind that they gained about a minute when this course flattens out before we get into the last monster climb starts here on stage 17. When they're on the flats, you see the two riders up front, the two Dutchies. They're pulling, going hard, 100% motivated to make this break work. They get their time gap up to about a minute and a half again. So remember, Mathieu van der Poel had a minute and a half lead on the penultimate climb and still got brought back. Now they're starting the final climb here, but this final climb is even more difficult than the penultimate climb because it's almost 10% pitches all the way from the bottom to the top for 8 kilometers. It'll summit with about 8 kilometers to go in today's stage. So keep that in mind. That's always important, that last 8 kilometers. Now, as the two Dutch riders begin the climb, it's Mathieu van der Poel that starts the acceleration, and Hess Limrezer's falling off the pace. He drops back about 10-15 seconds, but then Hess Limrezer finds a second win because he's holding on dearly, trying to keep that gap at 10-15 seconds to Mathieu van der Poel. We see the face of Mathieu van der Poel. He's absolutely at the limit. Remember, Mathieu van der Poel has been in all of the attacks throughout today's stage, made a couple of his own, been out there in small groups that got caught when he was with that group of 4. Now he was in a group of 2, dropping all the way down the penultimate descent and into the final climb here. And now he's going solo again. Mathieu van der Poel is firing bullets all over the place like he's at the OK Corral, but it looks like he's going to win today's stage. He's still got Limrezzer back there, though, at about 10-15 seconds. Then behind in the GC group of favorites, it's Ineos on the front. Bahrain Victorious had done a little bit of work going up the penultimate climb to see what the legs were like of all the favorites, but Ineos had taken over down the descent and led into this final climb. 2 kilometers into the climb, when all the action was happening at front and Mathieu van der Poel was dropping everyone, Hugh Carthy had finally dislodged some of the dead wood like Mauri van Savenot and Koen Bouwman. Those riders dropped off early in the climb. While that was happening, Bahrain Victorious had gotten on the front. It's Novak on the front, Wout Poels sitting second, and, of course, Landa sitting third. Now, remember, Santiago Botargo is up there in the front group with Hugh Carthy in the second group, I should call it. Sorry, my apologies. With 11.5 kilometers to go as Limrez, the Jumbo-Visma rider, comes out of the tunnel into the light. He's got the wheel of Mathieu van der Poel in sight. He'll close the gap to Mathieu van der Poel and then throw in an acceleration as Mathieu van der Poel gets gapped by the young Dutch rider who's riding fabulous here for Jumbo-Visma. He'll start off on his own. Now, when we go back to the Hugh Carthy group, Santiago Botargo, who had crashed earlier in the stage, if you remember right, after the first KOM, he's looking fine and he's thrown in his attack on Hugh Carthy. Hugh Carthy had been riding the front throughout almost all of this stage, and now Santiago Botargo, while his teammates are riding the front on the GC favorites, they're battling for GC, Santiago Botargo set out on his own to try to bring back Hess Limrez. Hess Limrez got about a minute gap. He's going 100%. Santiago Botargo's bringing back time seconds by seconds as the time is starting to drop. The rider back there is putting on a fabulous show with about 500 meters to go. The battle for the stage win here on stage 17 is in sight, and Santiago Botargo has Hess Limrez, the Jumbo-Visma rider, back wheel. He lines up on his back wheel, then he sits up to go to adjust his jersey. Back in the GC favorites, now we start seeing with Bahrain Victorious after they came off the front, it's Richie Porte that gets on the front. He starts setting the pace hard. Now with Richie Porte's accelerations, it's only the favorites -1 Almeida. Almeida had come off early in this final climb when Bahrain Victorious went to the front. He got popped. He had one Alessandro Covi with him, but Covi had been in the break all day long, so he wasn't going to do him any good. Back there, Almeida's doing everything on his own to try to do damage control again for another mountain stage here at the Giro d'Italia. Up front with Richie Porte, once he finally stopped pulling, it's Mikel Landa that throws in the big attack. With Mikel Landa's attack, you're going to see Jai Hindley there, and of course, Carapaz in exceptional form still at this Giro d'Italia. Now, the big surprise here in this group of 3 that just became 4 is Wout Poels. Wout Poels, who's done an amazing job pulling on the front, setting up all these attacks, now finds his way back up to the front group and starts pulling again for Mikel Landa. Now you got 4 guys in the front group, but let's go back up to the front because it's 500 meters to go. And Santiago Botargo sitting up straight, adjusting his jersey. Now he zips his jersey up, throws in an attack shortly afterwards. When he was zipping the jersey up, though, I was sitting on the couch, I was like, oh man, You don't have time to zip up your jersey with 400 or 500 meters to go when you just caught the Dutchman's wheel, and we just saw Hess Leesman bomb down the descent and drop Matthew van der Poel on the descent just before this final climb started. Now it's 400 meters to go. It's Santiago Buitrago who throws in a massive attack. Hess Lemrace does a great job of closing the gap. Again, he's suffering and on the limit. It's 150 meters to go. Santiago Buitrago throws in another huge attack, and with 100 meters to go before the top of the KOM, Jumbo-Visma's Hess Lemrace falls apart. His head drops down. The gap opens up when he comes around the slight bend with only 100 meters to go to the KOM. You look up in the picture, and Santiago Buitrago, the Bahrain victorious rider, is out of sight and started down the descent. Now, this is going to be a difficult descent, and it's not just straight all the way down to the finish line. It's going to have curves, switchbacks. It's going to rise again and have little accelerations, little lifts in the road here, and then with 900 meters, it's going to rise back up to the finish. So I'm sitting on the couch. I'm just wondering what Hess Lemrace can do down this descent, because the gap has got to be about 10-15 seconds when he went over the KOM. He drops down the descent, and he's trying to make up time through the next corners. But guess what? Up front, Santiago Buitrago, he really wants this stage 17 win, because we all know the history with stage 17 victories. He's riding on the front, full gas, with every little acceleration in the road. He's out of the saddle, pushing hard on the pedals, drops down the final 2 kilometers with about a 25-second gap on the Jumbo-Visma rider behind, and then with 900 meters, he starts accelerating, going up to the finish line of today's stage 17. We'll see him look back just near the finish line, because the Bahrain victorious won here on stage 17. Remember, the kid crashed early in today's stage. He rode tactically smart from that moment through all the way to the finish of today's stage, basically letting Jumbo-Visma or Hugh Carthy do all the work throughout today's stage, jumping Hugh Carthy's group just near the finish, bridging that minute gap up to Hess Lemrace, who had dropped Matthew van der Poel, bridges that with 500 meters to go, drops him with 150 meters to go, and now wins a spectacular stage 17. 5 mountain climbs of stage 17. Don't tell me it was 3, because I watched it. It was at least 5, if not more. And so takes this win to help Bahrain victorious get a stage win here at the Giro d'Italia. Now behind, the stage isn't finished for Bahrain victorious, because they were solid on the pedals with aggressive attacking left and right. Mikel Landa was on the front pulling and attacking Carapaz and Jai Hindley. Every time there was a slowing of the pace, Wout Poels did a great job to come back. Those 4 will caress the last KOM here on stage 17. Bomb down the descent. Mikel Landa will pull the last K.5. Then Richard Carapaz will take over as the road slightly goes up, and he'll get 5th on today's stage, 2 minutes and 53 seconds behind the stage winner of Santiago Buitrago. Now, up front, I got to mention, it's Jan Hurt. He's moved himself up into the top 10 of the general classification with being in that big 23-man breakaway here on the stage. Great job from Intermarché again, getting the rider to move up in the top 10. And they needed that, because Posavivo got popped earlier in the stage and lost a bunch of time with Alejandro Valverde. Now, one other thing that I don't want to forget, it was Simon Yates that abandoned today's stage with 60 kilometers to go left on today's stage 17. So he's out of the Giro. That's one of the big-time favorites gone. Now, he had some bad luck with a knee injury after his crash on stage 4, but then won 2 stages here at the Giro. So it's a big loss to see Simon Yates leave. Hopefully he's getting ready for the Tour de France and his knee heals up for a great July race at the Tour de France. Now, when we get back up to the favorites, Mikel Landa will lose about 14 seconds to Jai Hindley and Carapaz on today's stage. No big deal, but that will move him onto a podium. So with the stage win of Santiago Buitrago, now they got a podium position here on stage 17 for Bahrain victorious to try to see what they can do in these future mountain stages. Now, Almeida, the Portuguese rider from UAE Team Emirates, he suffered on this final climb, but he only lost 1 minute and 10 seconds to the 3 GC favorites of Richard Carapaz, Jai Hindley, and of course Mikel Landa. So he's still in a fight. after stage 17, we still got 4 riders battling for the general classification, and Richard Carapaz, who won the sprint against Jai Hindley on today's stage, but there were no time bonuses available on today's stage. So when you look at yesterday's stage where Jai Hindley took time bonuses, now Richard Carapaz doesn't get them, but still managed to beat Jai Hindley for the sprint here on stage 17. This was a great stage. If you get a chance, watch the whole 202 kilometers. But if not, you want to go back at least to the first legitimate KOM when all the attacks came from Jumbo-Visma here on stage 17. Make sure you guys like and subscribe because there's a bunch more racing and a bunch more exciting mountain stages to come here at the Giro d'Italia.